Hello and welcome to the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast, broadcasting from GnosticWarrior.com in San Diego, California, to around the world. I'm your host, Mo, and today on the show we have expert writer and researcher Robert Morningstar. Robert has been on the cutting edge of alternative history and research for the last 3 decades. He has covered everything from the assassination to John F. Kennedy to America's secret space program with some surprising revelations. In this interview today, Robert tells us some details about the John F. Kennedy assassination that haven't been revealed before, and also secrets of the secret space program here in the United States. This is really an awesome podcast, and it's a great honor to have Robert on the show. Welcome to the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast. How you doing today, Robert?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. Before we get into the great work you are doing now, can you please tell us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Well, I'm Robert Morningstar. I've lived in New York for 63 years. In the course of that life, I've gone to school. I went to school in New York City, parochial schools. I went to a prep school that's very famous for people who still love basketball. From the old days, I went to Power Memorial Academy. And one of my classmates was Kareem Jabbar, when his name was Lou Alcindor. Then I went to Fordham University, where I was a pre-med student, then switched over to psychology. And for the last 35, 40 years, I've been a psychotherapist here in New York. But my psychotherapy involves physical fitness as a cornerstone. You can't have a healthy mind without a healthy body. You know, mens sano in corpore sano, the Roman saying, a sound mind in a sound body. So I dedicated my life to Tai Chi and the application of Tai Chi toward health, wellness, balance, and healing. I do a lot of work in helping people avoid surgeries for spinal injuries, recovery from knee aches, joints, and other forms of distresses. And the main part of the word distress is stress. So I specialize in helping people get rid of stress, both by counseling, exercise, and teaching Tai Chi Chuan, which is one of the greatest blessings of my life.
Robert, this is the first time I've really seen you. I've seen pictures of you, but I have a video feed coming here through Skype, and I'd say you look really great for 63 years of age. And
yeah, for 66. I spent 63 in New York. Three years were in the South and the far South, because I was actually conceived in New Orleans and born in Nicaragua. And I had the privilege of having my infancy in a paradisical state. Nicaragua, from 1948 to 51, was the most beautiful and pristine tropical country you could ever imagine. And I grew up in nature, my feet solidly planted on the ground, horizon, sky, and a jungle full of friends. So then I came to New York, and it's been the concrete jungle ever since. But I tell you, I love New York City. I despise all the bad things you hear about it on TV. People don't want you to come here. They have a vested interest in painting the city negative. But I'll tell you, friends, 10 million people live here, and we live here because we love each other. All races, colors, and creeds. We haven't seen anything like what's going on in Ferguson, in New York City, in decades. We've learned to live with one another, and honestly, from the bottom of my heart, 9/11 taught us, when the towers went down, that we really love one another, that we care about every single person. Talking about psychology and physiology, you know, the control of your retina is something that's automatic and eye focus. And I like to tell people that after 9/11 happened and those 3,000 people died, every time I met a stranger on the street for the next 2 months, I noticed something in the eyes that the strangers, and probably I myself, looking at strangers, we would look at each other, and the eye would do kind of a double take. For example, when you have a zoom camera and you press the auto zoom, it goes whoop, whoop, whoop. You know?
Yeah, really before it adjusts and focuses.
Yeah. Well, this was subconscious, and every look, you know, said the same thing. And it was, hello, stranger. I don't know who you are, but I'm really glad that you're alive. And that was a feeling that spread through the whole city. We had no ethnic backlash. We had no violence against Muslims, and we haven't had any. And, we were the ones that got hit the hardest. And I think that it brought us all closer together. And I have never enjoyed living in New York City more than in the last few years, to be honest with you.
No, that's
so I'd like everyone to come and see it for yourself. Don't believe what you see on the news.
Can you briefly explain the great work you're doing now? I know you cover a vast variety of various subjects, but, one of the works that you're famous for is the secret space program,
yes.
The work on UFOs and stuff like that, and of course, modern history as well. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I got caught up in this as a childhood. I was growing up in the 1950s. I like to say I'm an atomic kid. We were growing up in the atomic era, when the atom was going to be the be-all for the future of mankind, atoms for peace and all of that. But in the midst of that, there was the UFO phenomenon, and it never stopped. And I was privileged enough to know people who saw it. My father, when he was in the Merchant Marine in 1948, he had a low, very close flyby at night by a UFO. And he told me about it. It shocked him in 1948, and he told me the story in 1956 as we were watching a report come in on CBS News, and they had a graphic, one of those cut and paste graphics that they used to do, cut out an airplane and cut out a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Tag the picture there and shine lights on it that fly. Well, he jumped out of his seat. He said, "Oh my God, that's what I saw. I saw that in 1948 when I was in the Merchant Marine, but I didn't have a word to describe what it was. That's what it was, a flying saucer." And he went on to describe how he was the watch on the night watch in the crow's nest, and he saw this huge light appear in the far horizon moving fast. So he climbed down the crow's nest, told the pilot, the guy steering the ship, and he said, "You better go get the captain." So he went down a deck or two to the captain's quarters, and he says to me, he was a Jamaican, and I wake him up, and he says to me, hey man, why you wake me up?" He says, Captain, there's a strange light coming. You have to come up and see." So the captain, all groggy, gets up in his underwear, runs up to the pilot house, and he sees it, and he goes, "Man, what is that, man? I don't know what that is, man." And they all, in awe, saw this UFO fly by their ship at about a 60-foot altitude and about 100 feet away from the ship. And the ship was sailing on a glass-like sea, no waves. But when the UFO went by, these waves came in from that side and rocked the boat, rocked the whole ship, sideways, Wow. And he says that they were so shocked that the pilot, who was at the helm, he wet his pants.
Wow.
He just and that, a lot of people do that. And I have a feeling that it also has a lot to do, not just with the shock of the moment, with certain vibrations, ultrasounds, and, actual other sounds that can be heard and that affect human beings. Sometimes the sounds, induce panic, and at other times, the sounds will induce euphoria.
It's interesting you note that the sea had became unstable and some waves rocked the boat, and then also us humans being made of 60-70% water, and then people wetting themselves when this happens. So I see a correlation there because everything is energy, chemical energy. We're made of water. The sea is made of water. So there has to be a connection.
Right. Okay. There's another aspect, since we are openly discussing this problem, the extraterrestrial problem, abductions. I have read and I have heard two very widely separated accounts of abductions and encounters with aliens. One was Phil Schneider, the famous worker who worked for military-industrial complex, digging underground bases, and the other is a South African shaman named Credo Mutwa. And Credo Mutwa was abducted in the Congo in 1959. There was a tremendous amount of activity in Africa, but specifically Central Africa, the Congo and South Africa. And the reason being that they have some of the highest concentrations of uranium on the planet. Be that as it may, Phil Schneider was digging underground bases and broke through some vault and found a whole reptilian colony underground. Now, both these men tell the same story, and it has to do with water and micturation. That's a very pleasant word for taking a leak. So Phil Schneider said that when he broke through this vault and found himself surrounded by reptilians and a firefight broke out and he had no other resource, the alien was coming toward him, that on instinct he took his hard hat and voided in the hard hat and then spilled the contents on the alien that he keeled over. And then Credo Mutwa tells that when he was strapped down to the table, the operating table, that they put abductees on, and there was an alien extracting semen between his legs, he looked down and he freaked out and he started screaming hysterically. He says that the leader of the aliens was bigger and taller than they were, was also female. And this female ET came over to him and commanded him to stop screaming. And he couldn't stop screaming. He was totally hysterical. And that she then took her hand and he described this. He said, "Sir, imagine this. Imagine a giant chicken claw coming over and covering your face and pinching your nose and trying to stop you from screaming." That's how it felt. And he said, when that happened, I lost all my control and I urinated on the alien that was trying to take my semen. And the moment that the urine hit him, he died, keeled over. Because the ETs, the Greys, don't have an alimentary tract like we do. They don't eat like we do. They absorb nutrients or toxins in this case. So, the stories are horrible of what people have seen at Dulce, and people who have been abducted have seen aliens bathing in fluids which involve human blood, animal blood, and serum, and they seem to drink it in like a sponge and then exude it like we squeeze sponges. So they have a particularly odious smell, which is also part of what drives people quite into panic.
Do these aliens, these Greys, have anything to do with us humans here on Earth? Do you believe there's been any type of DNA manipulation or colonization and we're actually their offspring?
I don't believe that we're their offspring. I believe that they are jealous and wish to create their own offsprings with certain attributes that we humans possess, in particular, a soul. I don't believe that aliens have a soul in the sense that we have. I believe that they are animate but not alive. Some kind of android it's another species.
Almost like a computer, like a thinking.
Yeah, what do they call it? It's a cybernetic organism.
Okay.
That's a combination of something fleshly and something technological.
So that's your theory after all these years researching them?
I have several ideas, beliefs. I do believe that they have been manipulating human genetics, but not to make us more advanced, but trying to repair themselves. I think that they are a degenerate race of beings who made some great mistake in the past. One of the things about them is that they appear to have lost the great majority of their women or females. We humans have women. They have females, because I don't consider them in any way related to us.
Okay.
So they are manipulating human genetics for their own purposes, and I believe that they crave certain things that we have, and one of those things is a soul. And what is a soul? A soul is an animating principle in the human being. It's also a faculty that allows us to travel and act in all realms of reality, that we can go from the ultimately densest form of matter and manipulate it and work it, say uranium or something akin to that, some very dense metal, and then we can actually leave our bodies and have remote viewing, and we can actually communicate directly with God. We have the capacity through the human soul to be in contact with the highest level of Godhead and the ultimate density of matter. And it is my belief that human beings are God's secret weapon. And because of that, because we can go from the spiritual into the material, work the material, fashion it, destroy it, reshape it, that in a sense, you can see me, I'm shaking my hand, wiggling my finger. Yeah. This human hand is one of the greatest creations the universe ever conceived. These 5 fingers can do so much. And that's a gift. It's a gift from our Creator. A lot of people don't believe in the Creator. Well,
no, it is a gift, Robert. And let me expand on that a little bit. So basically, we humans you would consider more spiritually advanced. And of course, we have the soul, which these aliens or these grays would lack, but they would be more technically advanced, but spiritually less advanced than us.
I believe so. I believe we're spiritually advanced but ignorant in a sense. We have an innate capacity, but we haven't learned how to utilize it correctly because in our upbringing, everything has been geared in our education to deny. In modern education, in scientific materialistic education, you're taught to deny those faculties. You may have premonitory dreams, warnings of something, foreshadowings, and they'll say, "Oh, I don't believe that. That's superstition. Nobody can know the future." Well, the future is interwoven with the present and the past. It's an unbroken fabric, a continuum. One of the things I like to say is that the truth is seamless. And if you find an element of truth, a thread of truth, and start pulling on that thread, you pull other true threads, and then you have the whole fabric. And then you can see where the fabric of truth has been altered, manipulated, damaged, repaired. And in saying that, I talk about the John F. Kennedy assassination and the UFO issue, which are my 2 most important contributions. I believe every person has an obligation to return something to the country. And in my view, what I've returned to the country is a clear picture of our history. From the John F. Kennedy assassination to the UFO abduction phenomenon to the landings on the moon. And that's one of the reasons I'm pleased and honored to be involved with the Secret Space Program Breakaway Civilization Conference, because we're a group of people who are bringing the facts to light. And in the course of that, I appeared in San Mateo, near San Francisco, in June to show some of the what I think are the most remarkable photographs ever taken by Apollo, which included towers on the moon, 100 miles high by my estimation, several of them, and photographs of the UFOs that buzzed and harassed our spacecraft and told us basically, don't come back. We canceled Apollo 18, Apollo 19, and Apollo 20. Or they say we did. They may have been run secretly. But we didn't go back to the moon. And I say to people, why didn't we go to the moon? We had 6 space shuttles, magnificent ships, old technology. And I'll tell you, had I been the head of NASA, I would have grabbed 1 space shuttle, say Atlantis, loaded up with 6 LEMs, lunar excursion modules, over there in the shuttle bay. I would fly to the moon. I would have flown to the moon, put the space shuttle in orbit, flipped that baby over on its back, deployed the 6 landers, sent 6 landers down to the moon with 12 astronauts to start surveying and start laying down the groundwork of a little moon base. We could have done that for 30 years every year for 30 years, every 6 months for 30 years, because we had 6 of these shuttles, and we never left Earth orbit. I find that mind-boggling, staggering.
So your feeling is the reason being, the only logical reason would be the statement that we were told not to come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Listen, the way what I have found on the moon, I sent you some of the photographs. I dubbed one Big Ben on the moon. As a New Yorker, when I saw this tower, I was like, wow, the Empire State Building on the moon. But there's a big, bright, white kind of a spotlight, like, at the very top that made it look like Big Ben. And the people of England saved us from jumping into World War III last year when they stopped their parliament, from going along with us into Syria. Mm-hmm. They stopped World War III. And it was a historic event. It's the first time in history that the people of a nation en masse stopped a war. They stopped their leaders from jumping into hell. And in gratitude to the British people who suffered so much in World War II, I honored them by naming this thing Big Ben on the moon.
That's cool. And Robert, I wanted to touch a little bit on that, the stopping of World War III and the voice of the people here in America. Sometimes, we talk a little bit about doom and gloom in this alternative history crowd and research, and it's great to have some positivity and to show that the people still do have a voice where they can stop things like this still.
Sure. We've always had the voice. It's just that we've been afraid to express it. We are going through a very critical period in our history. The situation in Ferguson, Missouri, cannot be separated from any of this. It's all one huge assault on our humanity. And I stand with the people of Ferguson against this police brutality, what I call police overkill. We are seeing this across the nation. Indiscriminate killings by police officers with the color of law protecting them. Once I saw the forensic evidence of what killed Michael Brown, I realized this was an act of a policeman gone berserk.
His hands were up, maybe?
His hands were up. He was hit 5 times, which had already incapacitated him. He got shot 4 times in the arm, 1 from behind running away, and 3 more times having turned around. He was already shot at the window of the car. When the gun discharged in the car, the bullet went through the open window and hit him in the shoulder. He took off. He was already wounded. So when he turned around, he put his hands up, and he was about to go down into the most submissive posture there is, kneeling down with your hands up, and he went down, he leaned forward, and the officer put a bullet through the crown of his head, put a bullet in his eye and the crown of his head. Those were the last 2 shots. Dr. Michael Baden says that he may have survived the shots in the arm, 4 shots, even 5 shots. But the one that went through his head and out his eye and back into his body, that's called a coup de grace, mm-hmm. an execution shot. And you see, I say the cop went berserk. Something happened. He went into panic, and he says, listen to this. He says that Michael Brown was rushing him. Michael Brown ran away. Michael Brown got shot. Michael Brown turned around and surrendered while the cop was running toward him at full pace. So this is the kind of hallucination that can happen to a cop under stress. He's the one who was running. You understand?
Yeah.
He's the one who was running after him, shooting indiscriminately, and kept running. Michael Brown turned around. So in the cop's eyes, his own velocity running toward the victim in this case now, made him believe that he was being rushed. But he's the one who was rushing Michael Brown. Michael Brown couldn't, after he'd been shot once in the shoulder, once in the arm, and then turned around. The lady who saw him, the young lady, she said he didn't take more than 1 centimeter step toward the police officer. He just stood there, his arms were almost up, not quite above his shoulders. So, police have been told that they can kill American citizens with impunity. And I tell you honestly, there is an evil force that uses crises and victimizes people to create greater crises in order to create greater control. And I'm afraid that the African American citizens of our country are being baited. They're being used and ensnared in a trap that could ensnare the entire nation. And my saying is this: we have to tell the government to stop using African Americans as bait to force through their police state.
What do you believe the reason is for this, Robert? The reason for the militarization of the police forces and the force? And I've heard news reports of IQ tests now being given to police officers. They always have been given, but there's new requirements, meaning if they're too smart, they're not going to get hired. They actually want them to have a lower IQ.
That's
so
right.
What's going on? Where are they heading with this?
Well, you see, it all devolves around this perversion that was passed called the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act has declared the United States, the homeland, continental United States, to be a war zone, and anyone who expresses opposition to the government or government policies is considered enemy. Their attitude. And these men, the police officers who have been taken in, indoctrinated according to these new protocols of the Department of Homeland Security, they have been indoctrinated into thinking that Americans are the enemy and that we are dangerous. Yeah, we are dangerous. We're dangerous to tyrants and despots. And I'm afraid that this global banking cabal has bought almost every politician in every country and wishes to bring about something that was called World Federation in the old days. World Federation was a term. It was actually a political party that espoused world government, and it was founded by Cord Meyer, who later became the head of the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control programs. Imagine that. In 1947, John Kennedy's arch rival, let me put it that way, his arch rival in politics, in careers, in love, he was vying with John Kennedy for the love of the same woman, Mary Meyer, who became John Kennedy's mistress. It's a long story and a huge can of worms, but basically Cord Meyer was he was a war hero like John Kennedy, and he had a vision of the United Nations being the vehicle for world governance, and he started a party called the World Federation, United World Federation. And it turns out that he met Einstein, and he was a very, very affluent, high society type of guy. And so he wound up in the CIA, and his job in the CIA was mind control. And his fingerprints are all over the John F. Kennedy assassination, including in the aftermath, the mind control apparatus that was installed to dupe the public, to make some of you believe that Oswald did it. I never believed that Oswald did it. Voice.
Your belief on the assassination of John F. Kennedy was because he was speaking out against this cabal and he was going to make measures to go after them?
Oh, so many more than that. He was exposing the cabal. He had already ordered troops out of Vietnam. You see, President Kennedy had a meeting with General MacArthur in the hospital. General MacArthur was dying, and President Kennedy went to see him. And General MacArthur had a very stern talking to the young president. MacArthur knew Kennedy from World War II because of the PT boat incident and the medal and, you know, PT 109. He went to see him to ask his advice, and quite bluntly, General MacArthur said to President Kennedy, don't get involved in a land war in Asia unless you're planning to use the atomic bomb, because there's no way that you can win a conventional war against the hordes, the Asian hordes. And Kennedy grew ashen and pale and shocked and realized that it was a dead end to go into Vietnam, based on what MacArthur had said to him. So he had ordered 1,000 of our advisors to be pulled out by December, and the announcement to be made, and that the rest of our troops would be pulled out during the coming year. And that actually is one of the great reasons for his murder, because he wrote that memo a week before he was assassinated, and on the Monday after the assassination, Lyndon Johnson wrote another national security directive that reversed it and just jumped into Vietnam. I call it jump into hell after the French movie about it. The French had Vietnam first. They handed us the problem. There was a movie called Jump into Hell. It was about the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the last battle where the French lost to General Giap. General Giap was kind of the MacArthur or the Patton of the North Vietnamese. And he beat the Japanese in World War II. He beat us in the Vietnam War. And he beat the Chinese in the War of 1975. Now, this is the idiocy of the policymakers in Washington. They were saying that if we didn't, take Vietnam, keep Vietnam, conquer North Vietnam, that the Chinese would move right in, take them over, and that they'd just be puppets of the Chinese. These people didn't know history. They knew nothing. The Vietnamese people have kept their identity, their cultural and ethnic identity for over 1,000 years by battling it out against the Chinese. So on the premise of the domino theory, we bought the war in Vietnam because, the Red Chinese are going to take over Vietnam. Well, we disengaged between 72 and 74. Then in 75, 76, the Chinese went to war with the Vietnamese. And pardon the expression, the Chinese thought that they were going to have an easy time with the Vietnamese, and the Chinese got their butts kicked. The Vietnamese sent them packing, and Red China went home. So how wrong can you get? As a matter of fact, Ho Chi Minh admired the United States. He admired George Washington. He wanted to be allied with the United States more closely. But the United States, when actually Ho Chi Minh won the elections in 1954, and when he won, the United States said, no deal, not fair, rigged elections, but the rigging was what the United States was doing. And had they pursued a different tactic in the 50s with Ho Chi Minh, our whole history would have been different. So I don't fall for these rigged wars. I fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. I was the patriotic all-American kid. I was in Army ROTC, and then Air Force ROTC, thinking that's my duty. And then something said to me, there's something wrong with this war. They're not trying to win it. All of these rules of engagement, they're all counter to victory. And my classmates are being killed. I didn't get to go to Vietnam because I was in college at the time and I had a college deferment. But I was ready to go. I was in ROTC. But slowly, I went to Texas in 1972 to bring a friend back. Her fiance had died. She was from New York. And I got to meet one of the real elite people in Dallas who was privy to what was really going down, what had gone down with the Kennedy assassination and what was going on in Vietnam. And I was a long-haired hippie in those days, when hippie was not such a bad word. And he was curious about me because I am an intelligent person. I'm a courteous person, and I'm open to debate. So the gentleman, Dr. Davidson, he was a really famous Dallas doctor. He said to me, why do you think we're all in Vietnam? And I said to him, well, we're there to fight the communists and preserve democracy. And he said to me, son, you are very naive. And I said, I was taken aback, I'm a real smart college kid. I'm 21 or so. And he says, son, you are very naive. I said, oh? He says, the reason we are in Vietnam is that we have found vast oil deposits off the coast of Vietnam. And if we don't get that oil, Red China is going to get that oil. And I said, oh, all right. So there's that story about Red China taking the resources, taking Vietnam, and they could not have been more wrong, because the Vietnamese have an identity and nationalism, I think, that is as powerful as our own. We as Americans, we're very clear.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how the French could go in there, and then their allies, the United States, and then China, some of the biggest countries with the biggest militaries in the world, and they couldn't take Vietnam, some small jungle people, that they thought. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the same thing is happening in Afghanistan now, and then, of course, we see Iraq.
Well, those lies, the big lies that led to Vietnam, the big lies surrounding President Kennedy's assassination, most of which I have exposed. I'm the one who exposed the doctoring of the Zapruder film. Anybody who believes that the Zapruder film is true or real is under a hallucination, because that's exactly what it is. It is a consciously engineered mass hallucination designed to change history, alter the facts, and make us believe the greatest falsehood that anybody could have ever concocted, the magic bullet theory. The next thing I showed is that the photographs of President Kennedy that have been shown to us as the autopsy photographs of President Kennedy are not President Kennedy at all. They are Officer J.D. Tippit, the man Oswald supposedly killed 45 minutes after killing President Kennedy. Here's the oddity. Oswald is supposed to have shot President Kennedy with a rifle from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, with the bullet entering the top of the back of the head and coming out the right temple. And 45 minutes later, he's supposed to have slain a police officer on the streets of Dallas with a handgun, and then walked over to him and put a bullet in his temple that hit the top of his head. When I read that in Jim Bishop's book, I knew that I had the secret. I knew that I had cracked this case. But what I thought then was, oh, they killed Tippit so they could use his brain. One bullet through the head, right? And so when you have a bullet through the brain, you can tell the path, but you can't tell the direction it came in or which way it was going. So they took Tippit's brain, which had been killed with one bullet through the head, presented it to the autopsists, and they go, oh, this man was killed with one bullet through the head. Of course, it was Tippit, because there was not enough brain left after the president's right hemisphere was totally liquidated to describe the internal organs of the brain that are described in the autopsy. So I thought it was only the brain. And over a period of time, I started to go through things and look at things, and my eyes started to open. And one day I just looked at the picture. I saw moles on the neck of the victim, the buck teeth. And even the first time I saw those photographs, which was in David Lifton's book, Best Evidence, in 1988, I think it was, I looked at the pictures. That doesn't look like John F. Kennedy. He's too young. That looks like JFK in 1948, 49, not 1963. So that I got curious, and I started collecting all the photos, and I realized that there was only one photo of Tippit that had been released to the public in those 30 years. And I started to question that. Why don't we see more pictures of Tippit? What's the big mystery about this guy? And as I collected more and more photographs, actual verifiable photographs of Tippit, all of a sudden, my eyes opened up. I'm like, oh my God, it's not President Kennedy. It's Officer Tippit. So that's it. He was the getaway vehicle. He was, listen to this. When I made this announcement in Chicago, 1992, I asked these questions in a closed session of 200 of the world's foremost experts on the JFK assassination. I said, why haven't we seen another picture of Tippit? We've only seen one. Why don't we have his autopsy report? Why was he buried so quickly? He was shot on 110 or so, 110, 115 on November 22nd. Nobody saw his body again. His wife was not allowed to see it. The casket was sealed. He was buried the next day, even though in history now they tell you that Tippit was buried on Monday, the same day Oswald and President Kennedy was. They changed all of it. Tippit was killed on Friday. Tippit's funeral was on Saturday. and it was attended by the police officers that were in his unit, and Jack Ruby was at Tippett's funeral because Jack Ruby and J.D. Tippett were the best of friends. It's a really, really strange story, but many of the people who were killed in the aftermath of the JFK assassination, you know about the 1820 witnesses who died within 2 years, a large majority of those people were people who knew of the relationship between J.D. Tippett and Jack Ruby. And now, last year, two incredible things happened. One is I uncovered the missing frames of the Zapruder film, which show that there were two shots from the grassy knoll almost simultaneously. And I also discovered a document written in 1947, the FBI, asking that Jack Ruby not be bothered and to be protected because Jack Ruby was working as an informant for Richard Nixon as congressman from 1947 and 48 on.
And Jack Ruby again, what was
Jack
his title?
Ruby, he's the man who killed Oswald to silence him, but he was one of the participants in the assassination. Jack Ruby is the man who drove a truck down to Dealey Plaza on the morning of the 22nd and had weapons to distribute. And he was seen by a woman who was driving down the road, you know, near Main Street. There's Main Street and there's Elm Street. And she said she saw a car parked off the sidewalk, like two wheels up on the sidewalk, and a man taking weapons, and she identified that man as Jack Ruby. So Jack Ruby was distributing the weapons to the grassy knoll. Jack Ruby was also distributing the false Secret Service identification papers that many of the assassins on the grassy knoll showed. And Jack Ruby had a map of the motorcade route on November 9th. 1963, November 8th and 9th, that night, there was a celebration at Jack Ruby's Carousel Club attended by Lyndon Johnson and Madeline Brown, his mistress. And I received this information directly from Madeline Brown, who wrote Texas in the Morning. So Jack Ruby comes over to the table and says, "Hey, look at this." And he showed Madeline Brown the motorcade route map to the November 22nd motorcade on November 8th. And Madeline Brown looked up at him and said, "Well, Jack, you're certainly in with the Great White Fathers." Now, who are the Great White Fathers? That's that phrase, when she said that, she wrote that, said that to me. Oh my God, the Great White Fathers. Now, we all know the singular of that when we see movies about the Old West, when the Cochise is negotiating peace, you know, with the representative of the Great White Father in Washington, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when I was a little kid, in 1961, I was debating. I wasn't arguing. He was my best friend, so we used to chit-chat. And we used to talk really deep things. Imagine, we were in 6th and 7th grade, and we were talking about who's the most powerful man in the world. Oh, some people think it's Khrushchev. Some people think it's Kennedy. Some people think it's the Pope. And I said, well, you know, the Pope has a lot of spiritual influence, but the Pope doesn't have nuclear weapons. And we have nuclear weapons, more nuclear weapons than the Russians. So I think President Kennedy's the most powerful man in the world. And he says to me, my friend says to me, well, that's not what my father says. I said, what? I said, who? He says, oh, my father says it's the Great White Fathers. And I said, really? Who are they? He says, well, nobody knows who they are. They're secret. And I said, really? I said, listen, you know, the Catholics have the Pope. Who do the Protestants have? And just coincidentally, he says, oh, well, the Protestants have the Great White Fathers. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it's a secret group of people they call the Great White Fathers, and they choose the president, and they tell the president what to do. And that's when I first heard the term. And this is a Southern term. So, as the years went by, it was resident in the back of my, childhood memory. And then Madeline Brown says to Jack Ruby, well, Jack, you're certainly in with the Great White Fathers. And I started exploring this. So I find out that this term was a term assigned to R.L. Thornton, the Dealey brothers of Dealey Plaza fame. They were the editors of the Dallas Morning News. H.L. Hunt, Sid Richardson, Clint Murchison, J. Edgar Hoover, Lyndon Johnson. These were the bigwigs, right? The Great White Fathers were the bigwigs of Southern politics and economics. And they saw John F. Kennedy as a threat to the whole system, which is the economy running on perpetual war. So he was trying to bring about détente with the Russians 10 years early. He was proposing joint flights to the moon with the Russians and joint ventures in science to bring about peace. Because tell you, honestly, President Kennedy had the hell scared out of him by the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. And what scared him the most was the insanity of the Joint Chiefs of Staff led by General Curtis LeMay, who wanted to execute a first strike nuclear attack on Russia by surprise. And President Kennedy refused. President Kennedy was so shocked when they told him, we've got to attack Russia. We'll leave them, LeMay said, we'll leave them a burning heap of radioactive rubble for 300 years. And Kennedy, stunned, he was shocked. He actually fell in, he sat in his seat and he cried. And as he wept, all the generals looking at him, pardon the expression, they would say, what a wimp, or something worse, And at that moment, Robert Kennedy stood up in this executive committee, and he said, no, gentlemen, you are not going to turn my brother into Tojo. If we were to do this, we would be no better than the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. And that, when he said that, President Kennedy, having the support of his brother, composed himself, and he told them, stand down. We are not going to attack Russia. And many people feel that when he did that, he actually signed his death warrant, because they said this man is a coward. He would never go all the way. What is all the way? All the way would be the destruction of the human race in a nuclear holocaust in which each party, Russia, Soviet Union, and the United States, was playing the game of MAD, mutual assured destruction. So, personally, I believe that President Kennedy saved the world in a manner no less than the Messiah would have.
And this military-industrial complex, obviously, John F. Kennedy was assassinated possibly by these very same people, and they would be still in control today, of course.
Right. The grandchildren that covered up the John F. Kennedy assassination, the grandchildren are the ones that are broadcasting the lies now on television that keep it going. There's it's a vast network of nepotism, hiring your own relatives, your buddies. And there was a great weaning, a culling of honest government workers after the Kennedy assassination, because anyone who did not go along with the party line of Oswald did it was not popular, and you didn't last. So they got a bunch of bureaucrats in there who were willing not to look beyond the ends of their desks and not to, under, the ploy of national security secrets. A lot of things have been hidden, but the truth is as perennial as the grass. And one of the things I like to tell people about my experiences in New York, the concrete jungle, I'll go down a street in New York where it's just been freshly concreted, sidewalks leveled and squares marked off. And a couple of weeks or a couple of months later, I'll walk down that same street and I'll see a crack in the concrete. And I'll look at it. Wow, I wonder what did that. And I'll keep walking because I always have this, and this is in particular, it's this path that I have to the park, it's Riverside Park, where I take many of my trainees. And over a period of time, I see that the crack in the concrete was not that anybody stepped on it. It's actually grass growing up under the concrete, seeking the light. and the pressure of the grass trying to grow up through the concrete breaks it, and you see the grass starting to grow in the cracks in the concrete in New York City. That's my analogy for the truth. The truth always seeks the light, like that blade of grass covered over by concrete, but it is so strong and so powerful, it has the power to break through the concrete. That's what we're doing. What you and I and everyone who's involved in this, truth seekers, that's what we're doing. We are the blades of grass breaking through the concrete of lies that has been overlain on our history.
That's a beautiful analogy there. And why do you feel, Robert, that now, with the age of the internet and this mass communication, that people such as yourself and many of the great other alternative researchers out there, and, I could say these truths without being persecuted? Or is there a secret inquisition going on, unbeknownst to us, against us, and eventually they're going to round us up like they always round up the intellectuals and take us out? Or do you feel that this is our time?
This is our time. They do go out of their way at times. They get desperate and they do things like the killing of Michael Hastings. If you look at that videotape and you see how they lie from the beginning. They provided a videotape that they claim was Michael Hastings racing his car at 100 miles an hour, and crashing into a tree. In that videotape, you can see two fiery explosions under the car before the wreck. Now, they went on and said, oh, look at this video. He's doing 100 miles an hour. Until a college professor came around and said, hey, that's not true. That video is a time-delayed video, and every frame is taken every 5 seconds. You see, most video runs at 30 frames per second, but surveillance video, in order to preserve memory, and in the old days to preserve tape, was slowed down. So the video takes frame, waits 5 seconds, takes a frame, waits 5 seconds. Just the same problem with the missile theory about hitting the Pentagon, where they show you the parking lot video that's supposedly a missile flying in the ground floor window and blowing up. That's not a missile. That's a time-delayed video that I've studied for years and years and years, and I can tell you that's an illusion. What appears to be a missile going in the window is really a silver tractor trailer going down the road. Its picture was taken one moment, and 5 frames later, the second moment, but it's just lined up in such a way that makes it appear like a horizontal movement going into the building. The plane actually did hit the roof of the E-ring. The Pentagon has 5 rings, A, B, C, D, E. You might say concentric if they were circles. Well, these rings have numbers and corridors, right? The buildings. The E-ring is the farthest most out. Then there's a courtyard, the space between that and the D ring. Well, the plane that hit the Pentagon hit the roof of the E-ring, exploded, went into the courtyard. All the gasoline went into the courtyard with the airplane. And there is a single frame. When you see the entire frame of that parking lot video of the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon, I have found it. I see it. The tail of the plane is visible, pieces of it flying off, and then the fireball exploding on top, and after it comes out the front window from the courtyard on the other side. So, see, the JFK assassination cover-up changed everything in our culture. It changed law. It changed the rules of evidence. It changed the rules of the weight of witness testimony. It changed the laws of physics to force true a false scenario of 3 bullets fired, 1 of them missing, 2 making the 11 other wounds, when in reality 5 shots were fired from several directions, from high and back in the left, high in the back and straight back, 2 shots from the grassy knoll, slight angle apart, let's say directly in front and right front, and 5 bullets doing the damage. So the Zapruder film had to be doctored. How you doctor it? Well, you got 5 bullets killing the man, making Swiss cheese of his head and body, coming from all directions. And you have to make a film that says 3 bullets were fired. So what do? You take out the intervening space, right? Bullet 1 goes right in the middle of the back. He says, oh my God, I've been shot. And this is the Secret Serviceman who testified to this. And Arlen Specter tries to debunk them or discredit them. And he says, oh, he couldn't have done that. He was shot in the throat first. He couldn't have said anything. And they said, no, he said, oh my God, I've been shot. And Specter says, how can you be so sure? And he said it with a Boston accent. And that ended that, right? Mm-hmm. The two Secret Service men heard the president say, oh my God, I've been shot. And then the throat shot came. You see? So they want to conflate two separate shots into one shot. So they had to cut the film. And this happened exactly when the car passed behind the sign.
What do you feel the reason for Jackie Kennedy, her silence? She was just terrified. She knew what was going on, and she knew
her children were under threat of death.
Gotcha.
You see, especially, she played the silent widow, but she was under great duress, and she knew that she was dealing with a murderer in Lyndon Johnson. Her tapes, by the way, have been released, or the contents have been released, and she says explicitly that she knows it was Lyndon Johnson that killed her husband.
Do you feel the son, Robert Kennedy, that plane disappearance was also an assassination on his life because he was getting so much beat? Go ahead.
I know a lot about that. I know more about that than anybody else knows, and I'm going to tell you something right now. I've kept this secret for a long, long time. I helped the FBI capture the Al-Qaeda cell of the 9/11 terrorists, and two of them were flying at the airport, taking flying lessons at the airport where John F. Kennedy Jr. took off in 1999. Mohammed Atta and Hani Hanjour were training at Caldwell Airport, Essex County Airport, at Caldwell Flight Academy at the time.
That's a definitely interesting connection there.
Yes, sir. I met them all. I bumped in nearly headfirst into Marwan al-Shehi, the second man to hit the tower. But I actually met Mohammed Atta in Hamburg, in a Hamburg nightclub or a bar, where he and the head of the Al-Qaeda cell in Hamburg was Ramzi Ben al-Shib. He's down in Cuba now, in prison. But I met him, and I met Atta, and I met a Chinese cohort who was described to me as the Chinese Taliban by one of my German friends. So then a few years later, in 2000, actually it was election day 2000, I flew up to Connecticut for a video shoot, aerial photography, but the morning changed to night. I mean, the weather just turned, the sky rolled in, turned dark. I flew back, and on that flight back, I had an in-flight encounter with Mohammed Atta during one of his practice runs. And he was landing at the same airport where I was landing, at the same club, and the same club where John F. Kennedy took off on his last flight. They found out that I was suspicious, and they tried to rig my airplane to crash 5 times in the year 2001. And I finally had to admit that, I had flown the airplane for 11 years with no problems, and now every flight for 5 flights I had a problem. And then I noticed that they were trying to rig it so that I would crash. And it's a very interesting and long story. I found myself flying upside down in the airplane, and the instruments were lying to me. They rigged the instruments. They screwed up the radio. They gave me an airplane with a half flat, a left tire, and an empty left wing tank. And anybody who flies a plane can tell you what will happen to an airplane that tries to take off with a half flat left front tire and an empty left wing tank. Well, fortunately, I'm a thorough pilot, and I picked up on all these things, and I had to wrestle an airplane down with no radios and no trim tab, porpoising, because they had rigged the airplane trying to get rid of me. So when I had that experience, I had to take my physical. I went to my FAA doctor, and he said, hey, Bob, how are things going? And I thought to myself, well, man, if you can't tell your doctor, who can you tell? I said, Doc, it's not going too well. He says, what's the matter? He says, Doc, I think these guys are trying to kill me. I said, why? He said, well, they know that I suspect that they killed John F. Kennedy Jr. because he took off from this airport, and they're really bad guys. I'm telling you, these guys are evil. They're up to something really bad. And he said, who are these guys? I said, well, the guy who's training them seems to be Eastern European, but he's told a lot of people a lot of lies. He tells some people that he's Hungarian. He told me he was Czechoslovakian, and he's really weird. He said, Bob, you know, these flight instructors, because it was like an Eastern European mob of flight instructors training these Muslim guys. So he said, Bob, you know, these guys could be war criminals. They could be escaped war criminals from the Yugoslav war. He said, how did this guy get in? I said, oh, he married an American girl. He said, that's it. These guys had to escape from Yugoslavia. They got different identities. They marry an American girl. They get into the country and, home free. He said, look, Bob, you got to go to the FBI or, go to the United Nations who's tracking down these fellas, these guys, these war criminals. I said, doctor, I'm going to do it. I called the FBI, and the New York FBI was the most professional organization that I could ever encounter in government. They heard my story. I said, go over there. They're up to something bad. And imagine, the towers had not fallen, right? The towers are still up. And I'm saying to them, look, you got to go check out these guys. They're up to something really bad. They're trying to kill me. And why are they trying to kill you? Well, because I believe that they rigged John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane and sabotaged him. And then it went on, and then it got into a turf war between the New York FBI office, who believed me, and the New Jersey FBI office in Newark, who didn't want to be told what to do by New York. So instead of going to the airport and checking out the suspects as I had pointed them out, they actually came out to check out my Tai Chi class and sent a camera crew to take videos, and with the most advanced video camera you could ever imagine. And my student says to me, hey, look at those guys. I said, yeah. He says, look at that camera. I said, yeah, look at that camera. I said, okay. And I looked at this guy, and he gave me the hard, nasty eye. It was a real surly looking, Anglo-Scottish looking guy. I know his name, but I won't tell it to you because I don't want to embarrass him. But he glared at me, and I glared at him like, hey, what are you looking at? But when people give you this stare down, there are two ways to stare down. You can stare down back and shoot daggers, or you can open your eyes and become an infinite pool of water and just absorb everything that glare. The daggers?
Yeah.
You just absorb them and just open, and you don't send back evil vibes or anything. You receive it and just ground it. Well, that happened. He had to break the gaze. And I said to my student, I said, okay, these guys want to film. We're going to show them the slowest, the best, the greatest Tai Chi form that anyone has ever recorded in video. And I do a Tai Chi form that if you take a slow motion movie and put it in slow motion, that's how slow I can do the Tai Chi form. So that's what they got. They got the video of two guys doing really great Tai Chi form. But they didn't go out to the airport to pick up the guys. And as a result, 9/11 happened. And about a week later, the pictures of Mohammed Atta came out, and Hani Hanjour and Marwan al-Shehi. And I said, oh my God, those are the guys I was talking about. So I called them again, and I said, look, man, I'm not going to embarrass you. I know this is a very bad time, but none of this would have happened if you had gone over there and taken these guys in. But then I said to them, look, I saw this guy in Hamburg in 1999. And so in 2002, I went back to Hamburg looking for the other weasel, who turned out to be Ramzi Ben Al-Shib, and the Chinese guy. And though I didn't find Ramzi Ben Al-Shib, he'd already fled to Pakistan. I did find the identity of the Chinese Taliban. I came back to New York, and I met with the FBI gentleman who supported my story and wanted the thing investigated. And he and I met with another FBI man for 3 hours, and I told him the whole story from Hamburg to Martha's Vineyard to this. And I said to them, you have to find this guy, Nicholas. That's not his name. It's a fake name, but that's what he told me his name is. He's a Muslim trying to pass off himself as a German. Find this guy Nicholas, and you're going to have the whole nest of Al-Qaeda and their helpers, the Germans who helped them, because this was a multinational operation. And there are many Germans who have converted to Islam and been indoctrinated and are following that jihadist path. There's a lot of sleepers in Europe. So that's a big part of my story, and you're getting it on the air. I think it's time people knew. John F. Kennedy Jr. was a fine pilot. He had made that trip to Martha's Vineyard 35 times before. And the reason that he crashed is they rigged his airplane so that he would have a massive electrical failure. No lights, no instruments, no GPS, nothing. And unfortunately, he wasn't pilot enough to be able to fly on a full moonlit night in haze and bring a plane down. But
it seems that the military-industrial complex, that when you're, of course, big like a President John F. Kennedy, or you have major worldwide media publications as a son, Robert Kennedy, or even Breitbart, who was taken out, I believe, recently as well, that they are going to do what they can to take you out. Us smaller guys, they seem to maybe play with other ways. Are you at all being targeted at all in the last 20 years, last 2 decades?
Yeah, in little ways. I mean, you see, my theory has been that the best way to protect myself is to give away the information. Just put it out there and disseminate it. Keep it going so that if they try something like that with Michael Hastings, it will only bring more attention to the subject matter. And the subject matter that I have written is so widely distributed now and archived with other people that it would be the worst thing for them to do anything. But they do harass you.
Yeah, Robert, and just a quick note for the audience, Hastings would have been a writer for Rolling Stone, correct?
Yes, and he was working on a very big article. It turns out that he was working on an article on Bo Bergdahl and his father's agitation or to get his son back, but also sort of leaning toward let's get out of Afghanistan and let the Taliban have the country. And apparently that was a very big embarrassment to the Obama administration and their plans. And for that reason, he was targeted. Let me just tell you this. I had a really great computer that was my workstation for 10, 12 years. Very reliable. And then I think it was February, I agreed to appear at the Secret Space Program and Breakaway Civilization Conference in San Francisco. And about a week later, my computer got hit with the strangest virus that you could ever imagine. It didn't damage my data. It didn't damage my programs. The only thing it did is it would not allow me to have access to the internet through a browser. McAfee could get it through the internet to do its updating and its processing. Skype worked perfectly through the internet, but Mozilla, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, no browser allowed me to get any email or any internet material. So I had to go back to this little 1996, 98 Vio laptop by Sony. Mm-hmm. Very limited, but I rigged up the memory so it'd be functional. And on that little laptop, I did all this work that I've done for the Secret Space Program. And I discovered the photographs that I've shared with you, the Big Ben on the moon and the moon racer and other things. I've discovered, and the DVD that we're producing for the Secret Space Program is going to contain all of these photos and this information. And one of them is a strip of film, and there are 2 strips of film which are mind-boggling and prove beyond the shadow of a doubt why we did not go back to the moon. I just finished shooting last night or yesterday a segment on the Apollo 17 lunar excursion module deployment. At that moment, an amazing thing happened. It was captured on film on the onboard camera. when the LEM was being deployed, that's the lunar module that landed, when it was separating from the command capsule, as it receded and the sky appeared behind it, a huge black triangular UFO appeared directly behind it, tumbling, flipping across diagonally from the top of the screen down to the lower right edge and border of the screen. And when the astronaut, Ronald Evans, Apollo 17, the command module pilot who stayed up there alone while the other two went down, when he saw that UFO, you see his reflection in the glass, in the windshield, just go into shock. His whole body vibrates with a tremor, and then his head what you're watching, the other people, the people who are listening can't see it, but his head goes like this to the window, and his helmet almost hits the glass because he wants to see this view of the UFO going around the edge of the glass. It's a marvelous piece of film because the camera was set lower and farther back than where the astronaut was standing. It was maybe 6 feet tall, standing right up at the windshield. So the camera picks up the UFO, I would say about 10 seconds or 15 seconds before the astronaut could see it, because the LEM was in the way, and he's concentrating on the deployment of the LEM. But as soon as the LEM had backed off far enough to show the sky behind it, this tumbling UFO, a black triangular UFO with white lights at each corner and a white light at the center. And I'll tell you, Mo, I have probably 10 photographs of this type of craft flying all over the world today. And as a matter of fact, I want to describe to you, I think one of the, if not the greatest piece of UFO video I've ever seen, it's pretty close to it. Richard Dolan, author of UFOs in the National Security State, showed this video at the San Mateo conference, and it was an excellent quality video of a huge UFO that overflies the videographer. The videographer is taking a picture or a film of Paris at night, overcast, because I believe I saw the Eiffel Tower in the background, but it was totally cloud covered. But they call Paris the city of light, because the light goes up like New York and it illuminates low hanging clouds. So this gigantic triangular UFO flies over beyond and comes into the screen from above, like the opening scene in Star Wars. Remember, they're chasing the little module and the Star Destroyer comes in over your head and you get a size of it. So it goes forward, it stops, and it's gigantic. It's huge in the screen. And it turns around, changes attitude, and you see the lights. You see the white triangles, the white lights on the tips of the triangle, and then it flips, and then it flips, and you see the white ball, the white light in the center of the craft. It's tilted like a three-quarter aspect, like that. And you see the bottom light. The bottom light starts to grow in intensity, and it starts to spread into a hemisphere. And all of a sudden I realize that the white light was spreading on the bottom, but on the top, because the top aspect appears. And so the white light enveloped the whole black triangle craft and turns into a big ball of white light. And all of a sudden, boom, gone in an instant. And for the first time, I saw and I understand how the quantum jump is achieved. This radiant white light in the center seems to polarize with the corners, and the globe of white light appears until it envelops the whole triangular. The triangular spacecraft is inside. The white light ball of sphere is completely surrounding it, and then it just goes, and it's gone. It was awesome. So I recommend anyone who has an opportunity to hear Richard Dolan speak and give his lectures, I highly recommend it. He's one of the most qualified scholars, historians, and ufologists around today. I'm very proud. I was very proud to be on the same stage with him. And so right now I'm working this documentary. The other thing is the Moon Racer. I believe I sent you 2 pictures of the Moon Racer. And this is a film that was taken by Apollo 16, where the camera caught this unbelievably beautiful, sleek, fast Star Wars type of UFO that caught up. It raced across the surface, over the surface of the moon, and passes the space craft of Apollo 16, and then suddenly disappears. And I have excellent eyesight, but I have quick eyes, and I was able to see this, and I played it back, and I saw that the film was doctored. The film was cut in the same way the Zapruder film was cut, but the cut was very jagged and crude and intentionally so. I believe that what I found was a time capsule from a technician of the 1970s who was told to doctor this film and cut out that spacecraft. And what he did under duress was that he cut almost all of it, but he left 3 frames intact at the end of the strip where you could see what I have called the moon racer crossing, overlapping the horizon, then completely beyond the horizon, so you see its complete form. The 3rd frame shows that when it got into orbit, instantly 3 lights, space stations illuminated, and after the 3rd frame is a partial frame where it's gouged. It's very easy to edit 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter film and just do a razor blade slice between the frames along the black border between frames. You see a jump, but you don't see the scarring. Well, this technician took the time to take 1/4 frame and leave it in and cut the jagged splice mark and join it so that little blink someday, I think I read it as a time capsule. It's my hope somebody will see this little flaw and take a look. And they never dreamed, they never dreamed in 1972 that you, Mo Denard, and I, Robert Morningstar, would have this technology. This computer sitting on my desk right now, through which I'm speaking to you audiovisually, has 1,000 times more power than the computer that was used to get those Apollo capsules to the moon. They never imagined that we would have access to this technology, but perhaps that technician, God bless his soul. There are a lot of great people in NASA. Some people think I'm a NASA basher, Mm-hmm. And I do. I bash the head of NASA because that's the policies of NASA that I'm against. I support the people in NASA, and I admire their courage in having to operate under such duress. So
your thoughts are maybe that he purposely did that so people such as us would find it.
No doubt in my mind, because if he wanted to do it seamlessly, he would have cut that frame. You know how the frame like this is a black border. If you cut across here with a razor blade and join it, you never see it. You'll see a little jump in the film, but the film could have just ended at that juncture without the moon racer coming into visibility above the horizon. But that's when it really becomes visible, because the moon racer is a stealth craft that's very hard to see against the lunar surface. It looks like an icicle of sorts. It's a stealth craft. And I tell people, when I saw it, I thought I was looking at Wonder Woman's airplane. Remember the Wonder Woman? She flew a glass airplane.
Yeah.
And that's how it was semi-stealth. Well, I thought I was looking at something like that. And when it breaks over the horizon, I have one photo that's, half of it, 3/4 of it is above the horizon and one wing is below the horizon. And then the next one is completely free. But it's the most unusual spacecraft, that we could imagine. Not a reaction motor spacecraft. It's not something that's burning anything and spewing. It is purely electromagnetic-gravitic. You can see it. There's no exhaust. There's no rocket burning. And it is so fast that it catches up with the space capsule that's orbiting the moon and just leaves it, pardon the expression, in the moon dust.
Robert, I know you're limited on time today. You have another interview here shortly, and
yes.
We covered various subjects today. What I would love to do is have you again on in the near future where we could maybe dedicate a show, actually 2 shows, one being to the secret space program and your incredible knowledge on UFOs and the government, NASA, and so forth, which I believe would cover several hours, and then maybe we could also do another podcast on secret government and the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which I feel you're very knowledgeable as well. Do you mind coming on again?
I would love to do it. The John F. Kennedy work has reached fruition. I would like to announce that I have discovered the missing frames of the Zapruder film, and that there were 2 shots at the grassy knoll, and the only hero in Dealey Plaza that day was Jacqueline Kennedy.
Great.
And she's the most slandered and libeled person of all, because the doctoring of the Zapruder film makes it look like she was a panic-stricken woman running for her life. Nothing could be farther from the truth. There was a lioness there trying to protect her husband. She almost lost her own arm. And the final 2 headshots went by. The one that took out the back of his head, the bullet must have grazed her arm. And her reactions are so fast that she actually tried to grab the piece of skull that was flying off. And when she missed it, she climbed out like a cat to retrieve it. I'll tell the story on your show. I'll be happy to come back.
Definitely,
and discuss
Robert.
these things. Thank you very much.
Sure, no, and I just wanted to add before we leave here today is that the government is actually even coming out in the media and letting the people know that they're placing disinformation purposely out there. And this last article I seen on this was last week, and it was regards to UFOs and space programs. And you've already pointed out in this show that they are doing this and you have caught them. So we need to understand that this happens in every conspiracy and subject out there that we, the people, investigate, that there's going to be incredible amounts of disinformation purposely put there by the powers that be. But before we wrap up the show today, Robert, can you tell the audience where the best place is to find your great work?
Okay, you can go to Facebook if you have Facebook. Okay. I have Robert Morningstar with the head of the dolphin. That's my avatar, because I espouse the consciousness that we have to raise our consciousness to the consciousness of the dolphin, working with the work of John Lilly. And there's a secret space program Facebook page that it's called that.
Okay. And what I'll do, Robert, just so...
And UFO Digest. I'm the editor of UFO Digest, and we're publishing a lot of stories, and I edit and I write for UFO Digest. So keep an eye on that. We have an article there about lifting the veil for the good of humanity by Deborah West, and that covers some of the philosophy of the secret space program. So I'll point you in that direction, and look forward to our next meeting.
Yeah, definitely. And for the audience out there, I'll put links to Robert's Facebook page on GnosticWarrior.com along with the show notes as well, and the pictures that he had mentioned, and we'll have him again on the future. Robert, it has been a great pleasure speaking with you today, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.